pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today. Duane, today it's the first show in the brand new studio for me, because the studio is not big enough for, well, it's not one part in Toronto, one part in Montreal. Right now it's in Montreal, but feels weird. Feels good.
Yeah, it would be a very, very, very large studio if I was able to be in it as well. Or we got a huge Patreon donation, and I have moved to Montreal based on this massive amount of money that we're now making. But neither has happened, so I'm here. And unfortunately, first day with the new sound and all this fancy stuff, and I have to be on my phone. But we're gonna make do. It's gonna be okay.
It happens, Duane. Sometimes Hydro Ontario doesn't want to cooperate. Or is it Bruce Power? Anyways, they don't want to cooperate.
Yeah, something.
Speaking of not wanting,
fell off the wheel.
Yeah. Speaking of not wanting to cooperate, 9 goals last night. Quite an avalanche of goals on both games. You know, this New York Red Bull Chicago game. Who would have thought that Chicago was the higher seed in that game? Because, well, it didn't feel like it.
No, and yeah, we'll get to Vancouver in a second. Obviously, 9 goals, 2 teams scored them. Unfortunately, they weren't in one game. It was 2 blowouts, which is not a great way for MLS to start its playoff. But the upset of the night, the Red Bulls, at least in points, the upset happening there. When you look at the overall season that the Fire had, we were talking on Twitter last night, a few of us, that reminded us a lot the whole way that game was playing out of TFC in 2015. That they hadn't made playoffs obviously in a long time, and they started very well. Chicago actually was the only other team to be on. Well, I shouldn't say that. The only other team in the last, once it's relevant to be on top of the Supporters Shield race this year. People almost forget that they went up on 2 points by TFC in July, and then immediately fell down the next week and started a sort of a bit of a spiral down, and kind of weren't that great for the last couple months of the season. And then, of course, they get their playoff game, and it's boom, 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 almost immediately. Well, boom, boom anyway, and it had a very eerie feel to that TFC season, and the way that they'd ended with the 3-0 win for the impact of that game a couple of years ago. But certainly something for the Fire to build on moving forward. It's got to be disappointing for them last night. Didn't really show up at home in front of a very small crowd at Toyota Field. I guess they could take some solace in that, ironically, that there were at least weren't many people there to watch it.
11,547 was the announced attendance, and yeah, you can give a bit of flack to Bridgeview or Chicago area for not showing up for a playoff game, but let's not forget, maybe playing devil's advocate here, but it's 3 days to build the attendance. Yes, you have your season ticket holders and your newsletter you can send quickly to send tickets, but it's hard to sell tickets for a stadium not downtown 3 days apart from knowing when that game will take place.
Yeah, not even 3 full. The game's Sunday. And you've got 2 work days basically. And look, some fan bases would do okay. I can think locally here that in a notice like that, you'd probably get a bigger crowd than they certainly got in Chicago last night. But there's so many more advantages here. You have a more engaged fan base anyway, just because when you have those original teams that have struggled for a while, often, there's less excitement around those teams. It's just the reality of the league. You see it in Columbus. Some of the problems there are likely to do with just sort of fatigue. Not fatigue's the wrong way to put it, but when those teams have been there, they don't have that new shine that expansion teams have, and they have been bad for a while. Bridgeview is so far for people to get to. They normally have a bus that connects people directly to the stadium from a hub somewhere. I think it might be Midway, the airport. It hubs them straight over. And there's a bus that runs like a shuttle bus that runs basically to the stadium. That doesn't run in the playoffs, and they have no ability to have that run in the playoffs. And that stuff plays a factor in people's decision to go, especially it's a work night too, and to get off work and you have to maybe go home and change your clothes or go and like it's cold, you want to wear proper clothes and you have to get home first, right? Like it's logistically it's just difficult, and I think we're too quick sometimes to just go, oh, bad fans, and not really think of the pragmatism of it. And so I never blame them for these knockout round games. It's always going to be a challenge, and you know the supporters were there. Section 8 was decently filled, so I think that's your key and something to build on for next year for sure.
And now in the game itself, New York, I'm gonna go. Whoever designed things and thought that yellow and navy would go well together. I don't know what's going with this like color scheme. I know where it comes from. It's the Red Bull color scheme. It's the Austrian energy drink company's like colors, but navy and yellow don't go together, Duane.
Well, you have those crazy Europeans and their energy drinks, I guess. Yeah, no, those uniforms are a bit something. I certainly would never wear one myself if I had been a Red Bulls fan. But you're a walking billboard. I guess you're kind of a walking billboard anyway. Whenever you wear a jersey, I don't actually own a TFC jersey, for the record. I had one. I gave it away to someone years ago, and I haven't bothered to buy a new one. I have several City jerseys, so I'm not innocent. But
yeah. No, and apparently, I walk around representing Yokohama tires, so it's fine.
There you go. Fair enough. And Etihad Airways is often on my chest. Well, the game, it started so well, and good omen off the top. And New York's been playing pretty well, quietly, the last few weeks because they were stuck in sixth. Really, they pulled away from the rest of the playoff field and sort of just solidified their spot there, but weren't really that noticeable simply because they didn't, they weren't charging up. They weren't like really competing for anything the last few weeks. So good omen for their top players. Question had a good game. BWP got the goal to start the things off. These things are good omen for them as they head in now to play either Toronto to play Toronto on Monday or Tuesday next week. That's going to be a big challenge for them, obviously. But you got to have your better players playing and doing well if you're going to have a chance to upset the top team. And they now, of course, will be pointing to that and hoping that they can build on that momentum of the knockout round. And you often see, they can also take solace in the fact that if you look at the final the last few years, it has been teams that have gone through the knockout round that have been able to take that momentum and build on it. And that may be something that MLS looks at moving forward, whether or not. I doubt they will, because they, tend to increase playoffs, not decrease. And we all dream a little bit, though. And you look at combine what I'm saying here and a need to or desire maybe to make the top seeds get a little bit more of an advantage with the fact that it is so difficult to sell these tickets on short notice. Maybe the solution to that is to eliminate this round and to make it more competitive to get in the playoffs. But we're getting ahead of ourselves there.
Yeah, that's not going to happen, Duane. The amount of sponsorship you get for a playoff game compared to regular season, you don't have branded like coverage of games for the regular season. You do in the playoff, it's not going to happen. But now we know that Toronto will face New York later this weekend, in the middle of next week. New York finished sixth, maybe better than sixth, maybe a fourth or third. But how happy are you that Chicago lost to make sure that you don't face Atlanta, at least not until the conference finals?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that of the teams that Toronto could have faced, that this is the best matchup for them. And, they did finish sixth for a reason. Not to say that any challenge in any team they played in the second round was going to be so TFC would be the favorite, but they would have a challenge. Atlanta would be the one that I think probably does scare the most people. I ran a poll last night, and it was overwhelmingly Atlanta that people responded with the team that they felt had the best chance of upsetting Toronto. And yes, it would be an upset. I had one Impact fan arguing with me vehemently that it wouldn't be an upset for Atlanta to beat Toronto. I'm sorry, when you win the Supporters Shield and break the points records, any team that does beat you is going to be upsetting you, regardless of whether you think it's a massive upset or not. At any rate, I think it's the best possible matchup. Toronto handled them fairly well in the regular season. There was a draw on the road that involved Josie missing a penalty in that and an offside goal that might not have actually been offside. It was pre-VAR. Well, not that you can turn back the clock on that anyway, but,
Yes.
but nonetheless, Toronto didn't have the best luck in the game in New York, but still managed to get a draw out of it, and then they won pretty easily at BMO Field during their hot streak. So the omens and the suggestions would all be there for Toronto, and they're going to be the overwhelming favorite for this, and they should be. I was talking to people on Twitter yesterday, and my response is that really the biggest battle of the Eastern Conference playoffs in my mind is Toronto versus themselves. As long as they play up to their capabilities, I think that they should advance to the MLS Cup final, which of course they would host based on their Supporters' Shield win. But as we know in MLS playoffs, it doesn't always happen. And obviously, if you're non-Torontonian or not a Toronto sports fan, you'll probably be hoping and cheering and relishing the idea of, the Toronto coming out in them and them somehow messing it up in the end.
Yeah, no, exactly. So let's just look at the other game in the Eastern Conference tonight, and we'll talk about the Western Conference after the break. Duane, tonight, Columbus, Atlanta. Does the Crew have any chance at Mercedes-Benz Stadium?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Crew played well down the stretch. They, in many ways, were amongst the hottest teams quietly during the season, and they're a team that almost represents their old badge and the ethos of what the Crew means, right? They have Miram and guys like that are good players, decent players that are amongst I guess the stars of the league. But by and large, this is a team that's a bit workmanlike and that can get the job done and sort of represent like I said, the old crest that they had there, the one that I think some of the fans are trying to turn back to because the new crest was designed by the new fellow there that we shan't say his name. Maybe that'll be a way. We don't want to.
It's true though.
But
I actually seen some people go back to their Workman's, the logo with the three workers on it.
The Village People, yeah.
It does look like the Village People.
Yeah, anyway, yeah. Well, and we're certainly
Save
not
the
going to.
Crew together
just
tonight. Sorry, Duane.
Yeah, on this show, we've never subscribed to the idiotic how they want us to call them Crew SC. I find that the most ridiculous thing ever that I have to say the SC every time, so I've never done it. But there's a lot of people that are now especially not saying the SC part of it because that's also something, the branding exercise that they want there, which is makes me cringe when I hear it.
Yes,
it's just the damn Crew.
It's the
Crew.
Crew.
No, they just do. And Atlanta's the other thing about Atlanta, Kevin, quickly, and then I'll let you jump in. They played so much over the last month and they started so great at home there with those big wins, but it's just that sort of Wednesday with another midweek game thrown in because they weren't able to get the win against Toronto in the last game of the season. That adds up, and I don't care how much talent you have when you've been playing that consistently twice a week or 3 and 8 or whatever it's been for how many weeks in a row.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough for them, and then they're going to have to turn around immediately again and play, in New York if they win that game. So I think that Atlanta maybe they dropped a few too many points early in the season so that they couldn't get that second spot and aren't going to be able to fully take advantage of what looks like, on paper it's them to be in the second best team. But no, I give Columbus a chance to win this series. In fact, I'd put them maybe 60-40. I'm still going to put Atlanta as a favorite because they are at home, but I'd say it about 60-40.
And one thing we don't realize with Atlanta, they would have benefited a lot of the bye of the knockout round, right? A team, like you mentioned, that played a lot in the stretch because of the stadium situation early on in the season. They played more on the road and a little game with more time between themselves so they can have time to build the stadium, and they finished in very home schedule, the easiest in the league they had down the stretch, but it was as well a lot of games in a short period of time. So rest would have been, even though Tata Martino tried to rest Martinez and Almiron against Toronto, especially Almiron, but you did have a lot of games, and when you add up all-star games for a few of them and everything together, international duties, it's a lot of games. But I still give the edge to Columbus.
To Atlanta, you mean?
Yes, to Atlanta. Sorry, it's Columbus on my mind.
Save the Crew. Hashtag save the Crew. Yeah. All right. Who doesn't need saving, of course, is the Whitecaps after that emphatic win.
Let's take a break and come back and talk about the Whitecaps.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
It's a good thing I don't have my camera yet because I was kind of dancing here while listening to the music. But next week, maybe, we'll have the new video component of the studio coming in.
That sounds fun.
Sure.
Who doesn't want to watch us?
Especially me, and just like your face. It'll be a video feed of mine and just your face.
I've said this to Kevin before. For some reason, there wasn't the majority of the It's Called Football listeners that watched us. We did it live the whole time with the cameras on us. That was something that Ben wanted to have there as part of it since the beginning.
He was a pioneer, Duane, when you look at it now. Like, now people are firing everybody doing video. It was like 7 years ago.
Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of people, the people that did like it, liked it a lot. I'll say that. And we used to get a couple hundred sometimes. We'd get almost people watching. We did live chats, too. And even though we tried phone calls on the show, that didn't really work out to the way that we would have liked, to the point that it's worthwhile. Maybe when you get a live feed up, you might be able to engage a little bit with the chat option. That might be something you could do.
Yeah,
we
can.
Lots of stuff
we need an intern. If we can find an intern that can come in the studio with me and just do like stuff while I talk, because I can't do everything while I talk. But yes, I agree. And speaking of doing everything, last night, Duane, what a second half by the Whitecaps. What a goal by Teixeira. And I have to say, Kendall Waston stepped up last night.
No, absolutely. The Whitecaps full measure. I mean, obviously, look at the scoreline. What are you going to say?
5-0. Of course, it's full measure. Yeah.
Beat down. So there you go. And there, Seattle's up next, and the West is wide open, and you can't, Vancouver's every bit of chance as anyone else there, and they're all excited in Vancouver too. I was watching them respond to this game, and their biggest excitement of the night was the Red Bulls won, and now because they mostly don't like Toronto anyway, but they'll be cheering pretty hard for the Red Bulls against TFC, because that is the one team in the West or the East, pardon me, that if they were to make the MLS Cup final, in Vancouver would then host it if they were to make it and play the Red Bulls. So that's the bit of victory there. But no, like in terms of the play last night, they showed up, and it's kind of funny. You look at the high, and this is what the knockout round does to you too. Like how excited the Earthquakes were on Sunday when they had that late goal in stoppage time to win, to claim the playoff spot and eliminate Dallas, and just they go from that like absolutely static high to that, and we're talking like 4 days later, 3 days later. It's almost unfair in some way. Like it's like the wild card game in Major League Baseball, where you make the playoffs and then boom, it's done.
Minus 21. Minus 21. The differential of San Jose before last night's game. Minus 26 this morning. Yes, it doesn't go that way, I understand. But Duane, why did we expect anything else? Like, one thing I saw on Twitter yesterday, I can't remember who said it, but it was every result of the Quakes losses, and they either win by 1 goal or lose by like 3, 4, 5. So why were we expecting something different? San Jose all season long were either focusing on winning games or just thinking about the next while losing a game during that one. We've seen 3-0s, 4-0, 5-1s, 3-1s many a times for the Earthquakes, and it wasn't any different last night.
I mean, if we're honest about it, we look at that goal differential, we look at the West, the way it played out all year, the fact that there was no real dominant teams. You look at the way Dallas just fell apart. You look at the fact that RSL was such a young team, and they have key players that are like 20 years old on RSL, right?
And those
overhauled.
Just sorry to interrupt, Duane, was go back to the beginning of the season. Those key players didn't play in the first 3 games, and that was the coaching change. Imagine if you had just a few more points from those 3 games. If you would have started the season with Mike Pitke, maybe you make the playoffs. Yeah. But that's something else.
Well, and they also had the U20 World Cup, where they lost some of those key players for. So yeah, that's what I'm getting at. There's just a lot of factors that went in to allow the Earthquakes to claim that last playoff spot. I'm not sure that they necessarily, in a normal season, because it's not a normal season where you're going to have a team completely flip a roster over that quickly and go young so quickly and then have it come together in the end. And really, I think RSL made the playoffs as the sixth-place team, and they were damn close with the amount of momentum that they had. They were the bottom of the league at one point. I would have almost put them as a dark horse to make the final, but alas, it didn't happen. And then you look at Dallas, which I don't think anyone can really, other than the theory about their players being distracted, there's like no one, they don't make sense. Like you have those couple played teams and those unique factors that are there playing a role. You know, Minnesota as well as an expansion team that was just dreadful for the first month. There's all of those things put together, and it just wasn't even competitive for the Whitecaps now. So it begs the question, what you take away if you're a Whitecaps fan. Obviously, you're excited about it because it was a home win. You got to see all those goals, and you're taking a lot of momentum and confidence into the Seattle matchup, but I'm not too sure it's predictive just because San Jose is not very good.
Yeah, no, it's going to be again, San Jose wouldn't have made the playoff if you just go with the fact you forgot to mention the Galaxy. Like, the Galaxy weren't supposed to finish last in the Western Conference. So, is the Quakes the worst team ever to make the playoff? But that's enough about the Quakes. Let's talk about the actual winning team here in Vancouver, Duane. And one thing I mentioned last night on social media, I got a bit of traction. You know, we talk about Toronto's depth, about Tim Bezpachenko as a builder of a club, basically, and how well he did in Toronto and how managing the cap, managing your money. Fine, it's easier to manage when you have a lot of it, but you still have to find a way to make it fit on the cap. So I'm wondering if for Vancouver, we talk about the depth of Vancouver enough. We don't talk about the work of Kyle Robinson, of the higher offices of Vancouver to build a team that gives you a chance to player like Bolaños, like Chani, like Teixeira, like a big move for Brek Shea. Might not be the best move on the pitch, but he's an expensive player. De Montero. We've seen Vancouver build a team that's now, with hindsight, has a lot of depth.
Yeah, the funny thing about the Whitecaps, too, is it's not just us that sort of doubt the Whitecaps roster building. It's Whitecaps fans. There still is a movement amongst Whitecaps fans out there that aren't completely convinced by the roster. But yet, over the last half of the season, they have been proving a lot of their doubters wrong, and they came very close to winning the West in the regular season, and are right there with both Portland and Seattle as I think the tri-co favorites. There was an article that went up at MLSsoccer.com yesterday, which was, the West is owned by Cascadia now, or something along those lines. I think that's absolutely true right now, and I'd be very surprised if the Cascadia team is not. With all due respect to Kansas City, I'd be very surprised if it's not the Cascadia team left standing at the end of this. Casey had given some chance, but I think they just don't have enough firepower to get through. As I've said many times before, you got to be able to score to win in this league, and Kansas City just really can't. And credit to Carl Robinson for him keeping his vision in mind, and he does have a vision. It's a very Latin team, as we know. They have a very specific recruiting policy that they use, and they've taken advantage of the networks that they've developed over the years to put a roster together that has proven a lot of us wrong, and still has doubters out there. But maybe it's time to say that, to mea culpa and say, okay, maybe we were wrong, and watch this play out. But that said, I'm going to doubt them again, and I'm going to make Seattle the favorite in that matchup. They're defending champions. They know how to win. They have high-end firepower. Dempsey's only going to miss the one game. That's something that makes a lot of people angry because he probably should have got a 3-game suspension based on how they normally call these things. But this is the playoffs, and it's Major League Soccer.
He was a repeat offender, if you want to look at it that way. Did he last year, 2 years ago, when he just took a ref's book and just shredded? I think it wasn't the national team though, but you know what I mean. It's not the first time we've seen Dempsey have
the U.S. Open Cup game, but yeah,
it was okay. It was ball, so it means it was with the pro referee, so it could be seen as a repeat offense. But yeah, we've seen Dempsey lose control in a way with referees a few times in the last 2 years. So I'm surprised there's not a bigger punishment. But yeah, Seattle fans are going to be worried. And That's one thing too. Seattle talked a lot this season about, oh, if you finished third and fourth. When they had the beginning of the season, they had a little bit of a hangover, and they were talking about, well, it's not bad if we finish third and fourth because you start. If you win your knockout round, you start at home, so you can carry that momentum from finishing well in the season, having that knockoff game and winning that one, moving on home, and if you put 2-3 past the other team's goalkeeper, you find yourself in an advantage going to the second leg of the semifinals. So there's a way to see that Vancouver might have an advantage on Seattle with the momentum they created with those 5 goals, with the fact they know that Seattle will be missing arguably their best player. I say arguably because Lodero has something to say with it. But yes, Vancouver, actually, before last night's game, I would have been worried if Vancouver finds Seattle. Now, I kind of see Vancouver maybe pulling off the upset against the Sounders.
Yeah, I mean, I'd give them a chance for sure. The West is wide open, as I said off the top. I'm still going to, largely based on the experience last year, when it's this sort of matched up like this, and the only real difference is that Morris is not available, and Morris was playing fairly well here in the playoffs, so noticeable. So Seattle's going to do that first team to shut it down. If they lose 1-0, I think they'd be happy with that. That'll probably be the goal head to do it. But I still, as I said, and this isn't me trying to bash the Whitecaps when I say this. It's just looking at Seattle's roster and thinking they have a little bit more there to get through it. And they are my favorite to win in the West. But we'll see. Certainly, although if you're the Whitecaps, it's all about the momentum, and it'll be the same thing, on the other side of the ledger, the game tonight. Whether or not people can take that, that's always the question. Whether you want to have the bit of a rest, whether you want to have this break heading in. It used to be a bit more of an advantage, and I don't really agree with this, that they moved these games to Monday and Tuesday to give the knockout teams that come through more rest heading in. I disagree with that. I think that they should be playing on short rest because that should be the advantage. You're giving the teams that won the bye, but alas, MLS disagrees. Everything's got to be with parity in this damn league. God forbid we help the teams that win. Anyway.
Yeah, true. All right, there's one game left to talk about. It's the one going on tonight. Houston sporting Kansas City. Can Kansas City score goals? And can Houston keep a clean sheet at home? It's basically the same. Which one will prevail? Houston's defense or Kansas City's lack of offense?
Yeah, and Houston's played remarkably well at home most of the season, so that is something to consider. But after what was a very, very good start, they haven't cooled off quite the same way that other clubs have. We've spoken about already, but certainly I still, in a knockout situation, I can see this one going to penalties. I think this one could be close. This one might be the one that we get to see extra time and be up late tonight watching. So that's something to think of there. It's probably the match that I think most people have thought, unless you're from those two cities, have thought the least of. It's not an expected matchup in any way. Houston's maybe a year ahead of schedule on this, and that's sort of in the back of my head as well when I look at this, that KC is a team, even though they have that lack of firepower, that I expected to be here this year. Whereas Houston, they've been that good the last couple of years, and you would have thought that it might be a couple of years off, but alas, they put it together again with the kind of a no-man's team that is able to sort of get the job done. They play very well in their own stadium. It's a toss-up, this one, though, to me. I really have trouble seeing exactly how I see it playing out, except that I do think it will be fairly close. I don't think this one will be a blowout.
As always, you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. We'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. as always from the new studio. Hopefully you like the sound. Hopefully everything is set up properly. I spent just 10 hours last night just setting up everything. Hopefully everything's fine. But tonight, 2 big games. We'll come back tomorrow to talk about it. We'll preview the weekend as well because the rest of the world of soccer doesn't stop just for MLS playoff. It continues to roll on. And we'll talk about it, as always, tomorrow. And, again, as always, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.